Hi team, how is everyone?
Good.
Yeah, good, Mark. How are you?
Good, very well. How's Boston, James?
It's roasting, I can tell you. This is going to be a sweaty World Cup.
How are the Scottish players going to fare in this hot weather?
Well, that would be the question. The fair-skinned Scots. I can tell you one Scot has done all right, though, because actually, Martha, was it you that spotted it on Instagram?
Yeah. I woke up yesterday morning, and what should I see other than, first of all, James Matthews doing kick-ups, and then I scrolled down.
Yeah,
I have to say,
sorry about that.
I scrolled down to see if you were getting any abuse, and
Not at all. No abuse.
no abuse. Sol Campbell, no less, England international,
Yeah.
complimenting you.
Yeah, Tottenham and Arsenal legend. I have to say, cheers, big man. He said, not bad kick-ups. That's from Solman official. So, listen, I'll take that. Even though, Sol, they're not kick-ups, mate. They're keepy-uppies, surely.
I call them kick-ups, but
My kids call them keepy-uppies. And James, I can report much more important than Sol Campbell. But members of the Stone household were very impressed as well. The first thing, you know how you turn on Instagram in the morning and it's the first thing that popped up was James Matthews and the football.
Oh.
And they were like, is that James? Is that James? He's very good.
I can't even remember what the story was about, to be honest.
Who cares?
I'm Mark Stone in Washington, D.C.
And I'm James Matthews in Boston, Massachusetts.
And I'm Martha Kellner on the other side of the country, the West Coast in Los Angeles. And very excited that we're all together for this jam-packed episode.
Yeah, jam-packed it is. I've been covering two stories in the nation's capital. One we'll get into in greater detail a little later. That is all about the mark Donald Trump is making on this city, on Washington, D.C., from cage-fighting arenas and triumphant arches to fountains that work and cleaned-up streets. It is a mixed picture. And, of course, as ever, we will get into the latest twists and turns with Iran. A peace deal? Maybe.
Yes, sounds like it's war and possibly peace for no less than the FIFA Peace Prize winner on the day that the World Cup kicks off.
That's right, Martha, already underway. The pre-match hype, I have to say, isn't what it used to be. There's controversy around ticket prices, visa difficulties for fans, players, coaches and referees. Problems with visas and the finger being pointed at the policies of this Trump administration. We've been speaking to Scots and Haitians ahead of their big weekend opener, and there are a few fans underwhelmed, not least the member of the Tartan Army struggling with last-minute entry problems. We'll hear from him.
So the World Cup, co-hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico, has officially kicked off as we record. Mexico playing South Africa in the Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. Not that World Cup fever has taken hold, at least where I am. I don't know what it's like where you are, but
Yeah, not at all.
hate to be negative at this early stage of the tournament. But, you know, it is a World Cup already beset by problems, visa issues, referees not getting access, fans, journalists, hotel bookings down. You know, it is really quite something that the last two World Cups have been hosted by Russia and Qatar. Yet this World Cup seems to have as big, if not a bigger, cloud of discontent over it.
Yeah, I agree. James, you're in Boston ahead of the Scotland game. What is the atmosphere there?
Good. I mean, the atmosphere is good. The Tartan Army are here in growing numbers. And, you know, they say no Scotland, no party. There certainly is a party in the centre of Boston and in Providence, actually, where they are gathering. And it's colourful, it's noisy, it's tuneful, and the atmosphere is buoyant. There's no doubt about that. The Tartan Army bring that wherever they go. But it's not the party it was in 1998. In fact, you know, I covered that, as I've said before. In fact, if you're watching on video, we can show you a picture now of the team, the 1998 team, by the Pont d'Avignon.
Look at you, James.
You've got a bit more hair.
I actually look older, bizarrely. But yeah, so that was then. But
that's because of all the work you've had done in America, right?
If only. That would be right. My Florida face. Stick around, that might be coming. But I know the Scots are in good heart, but they have paid, you're talking about 10 grand to get here, hotels, ticket prices. And there is that element of feeling robbed, actually, no matter how good a time you have. It's like going to an expensive restaurant. We were around at the stadium today, empty. They were testing out some of the signs and all the rest of it. Scots welcome, blah, blah, blah. There was a few Tartan Army members around. Interestingly, the way that tickets work these days, you don't get the piece of paper in your hand. There was a few guys I spoke to who'd paid $900 for a ticket and were yet to have that ticket activated.
Wow.
You know how that happens closer to the time because of the person who's selling it to you. So that's not so great. That's people on tenterhooks. There's a nervousness. But I spoke to Haitians. 3 guys, we went for a kickabout in the park. And of course, Haiti is on the travel restriction list. If you're in Haiti, you're banned from traveling to the United States. They don't like that. They think that football is the game of unity, designed to bring people together. And they reckon it's an affront to their country. One man we spoke to called it racism. Let's hear from one of the 3 Haitians we spoke to, Wadner Pia. This is what he said.
This is a time to bring the world together. This is a time for good diplomacy. This is a time to say, yeah, I may not agree with what you're doing, but as one world, we should come together to celebrate. But unfortunately, this is gonna be there forever. And in U.S. history, once upon a time, there was a World Cup in the United States. We call ourselves champion of human rights, but we deny players to come to play. We deny our neighbor less than 2 hours away from us. We deny people to come.
The thing that strikes me with all this is that it should be kind of a high point for the North American continent, shouldn't it? A real moment of unity celebrated through football for Canada, for the United States, for Mexico as well. But it just doesn't really feel like that at all. 2 games were held in Mexico on Thursday, including Guadalajara, where you were just the other week, Martha. Meanwhile, there is more information that's come out about why some foreign players and staff members have struggled to enter the United States.
Yeah, I think we all thought, didn't we, that visas were going to be an issue, and that has come to pass. I know you guys discussed on the podcast on Tuesday the plight of the Somali referee Omar Artan. He was turned away from Miami despite arriving into the US with a diplomatic passport. He says he had all the papers required. And Mark Wayne Mullin, the Homeland Security Secretary, he did the White House press briefing yesterday. He was asked about this big mess. And, he said the US has the right to refuse entry to anyone trying to get into this great country, he said, who is perceived to have criminal links. And I think perceived is doing a lot of heavy lifting there because, perceived by who? This sounds like dangerously like vibes-based immigration control to me. And, Gianni Infantino, Donald Trump's good friend, Gianni, he was asked about this quite rightly by the BBC sport correspondent, Dan Rowan. And Infantino says, chill, relax, everyone needs to calm down about that. Well, try telling that to this Somali referee, by far the biggest achievement of his professional career, the only Somali ever to preside over a World Cup match. That was what he was aiming for. And now he's been denied. And, no one's presented publicly the case for him having any ties to a Somali terror organisation.
Yeah, I was going to say, if he is genuinely a risk, present the evidence.
Yeah, I spoke to Andrew Giuliani about that on Monday. He's the director of the White House task force on the World Cup. And, he said he was in touch with bad actors. That's how he put it. I think there's a number of things about that. One of which is, try operating at that kind of official level in Somalia without coming across bad actors in a country which, is war-torn, has a dark history. There's also the fact, of course, that he has been celebrated as a national hero on his return home. But I don't know if you saw on X today, UEFA announcing, showing 2 fingers to FIFA, actually, and the whole process of him being excluded. Referee announced for the 2026 Super Cup. We're pleased to share that Somali referee Omar Artan will officiate the highly anticipated match between PSG and Aston Villa in Salzburg. So there you go, UEFA 1, FIFA 0. But yeah, there's all sorts of dissatisfaction at a significant level with this World Cup. I suppose, and you've made this point before, Martha, you get that. We've had that in previous World Cups. When the football starts, actually, people tend to forget it. You forget it if you are at the game and enjoying the football. I can tell you one guy who doesn't know if he'll get that far at this stage is Kenny Smith, member of the Tartan Army. We've seen him on Sky News. He shelled out nearly £20,000 for hotels, flights, etc., etc. He had, in common with a few dozen Tartan Army members, an ESTA to get him entry to the States. The status of that changed to not authorised. So right now, he's not allowed to get into the United States. He can't understand why that's the case. He's been down to the embassy. They told him he needed more paperwork. Right now, Douglas Alexander, Scottish Secretary, is speaking to the US ambassador to try to get him access on a plane for the game. 20 grand. And he's not alone in that. So as we speak, he's flying down to London, has an appointment at 7:30 tomorrow morning. I spoke to Kenny earlier today about his difficulties.
I went out with my wife in November on an ESTA that was approved. We travelled, had a great time in New York, loved the place. Checked my ESTA when I came home just to make sure, and it's valid until 27. Perfect. I'll book everything for the World Cup, and I cannot wait to get out. We've waited 28 years, absolutely dying to get out. Wednesday last week, I got a notification that my ESTA had changed. Now, I didn't even read it. I saw on social media that plenty of others were in the same boat. I then checked the email. Oh no, check the app. Travel not authorised. So we've been in an absolute fight because the only way to get there now was getting a visa, which meant an appointment at the embassy. So I went there on Monday, and the instructions tell you, do not get an ACPO certificate, which is a police certificate, unless you have got a criminal record. So I don't. I'm a director with a fire and security company. I have SC clearance for the Ministry of Defence. I didn't need it. I went down to London, a £500 round trip, to be told I needed an ACPO certificate and a subject access report. So my whole world's been turned upside down. We've managed to get it. We're still fighting the fight for hundreds of other Scotland fans. In the meantime, I've managed to get these forms, got them today to the US Embassy, and I have now got an appointment back at the embassy tomorrow, which will be another £500 round trip at least. And my flight is from Dublin tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And I don't know yet if I'm going to get a stamp on my passport and be able to make that flight. In fact, I was that convinced I wasn't. I've moved my flight to next week. But now I may be in with a chance.
There were obviously plenty of issues in Russia and Qatar, but I have to say, I was at Russia in 2018. The excitement levels were higher. There's no doubt about that. In all of the cities, everywhere you went, there were World Cup parties, people on the street with, their country's flags. And that just isn't the case here. At least it's not in LA. And I accept that, LA is a big, disparate city and it is hard for World Cup excitement to catch fire here. But, I was looking for somewhere to watch Scotland, Haiti, Saturday night, 6 p.m. Local time. The problem is, half an hour earlier, 5:30 p.m. Saturday, the Knicks tip off in, their very important NBA basketball's final against the San Antonio Spurs. And that's what the bars are showing. No disrespect to the Tartan Army, but that is the biggest show in town. And that's sad because the World Cup, the Football World Cup, should always be the biggest event happening. In
mind you, the next versus the San Antonio Spurs, Martha. Did you switch off at half-time last night when the Knicks were 30 points behind?
Do you know what? I did. We were listening on the radio because we were on our way back from filming a story in Mexico. And I did switch. When I saw on Twitter what was happening, I did switch back on. And it was very exciting. Even if you don't like basketball,
Game of the century. And I fell asleep thinking they'd blown it.
Did you? Amazing.
If you'd have asked me 2 years ago or a year ago, what I would be doing around this World Cup, I would have expected to have been at least one of the games with my kids who are far more mad on football than I am. But we're just not going to any of them because they're just like, too hard to get into, too hard to reach, and that's a real shame.
It is.
Yeah, I tell you one thing. I'm in a hotel near the stadium, near Boston Stadium, and in the reception, I'm happy to report they have the Scotland flag, but they also have this big display, this big international, welcome the world, with the Wales flag and the Northern Ireland flag, which is great. We love them too, but they're not playing in the World Cup. Bless them. I mean, the Americans can put on a show, but sometimes they go a bit too far.
Oh, you were almost gleeful when you said that, James.
Yeah, I thought that as well, Martha. Yeah.
Come on. No, listen, Wales, Northern Ireland, I stand strong with my Celtic brothers. But I tell you one other thing that stays with me, the Andrew Giuliani press conference. Actually, two things. One thing, he said that there would be protection against drone attack on any stadium. I know that's actually a bit serious, but that's a big fear, that drones now will be used for that kind of attack. He said that's something they were paying due heed to. But the thing I cannot forget was when he, on stage, addressed the audience and said, and of course, the British gave us the game of soccer, he called it, in 1913. 1913. I mean,
Yeah.
he was only around 50 years out.
As we were saying, jam-packed day of news today. Mark, you've been marshalling it all for Sky in Washington, DC. Rollercoaster rhetoric from the president on Iran.
Yes, on Iran, which came at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. A day which, for me, began very early at the White House, looking at the UFC cage that's been put on the South Lawn. It's quite extraordinary. I'll get into that in a moment. But much of the day was, yes, taken up with Iran. Another day of conflicting statements. Another kind of day of whiplash, to be honest. Trump making these two significant statements just a few hours apart. The first early on Thursday morning, while I was looking at his cage ring, whatever you want to call it, the octagon on the South Lawn. He was somewhere just inside the White House tapping things out on Truth Social, and a big statement from him suggesting that the evening that was to come would be the third night of massive US airstrikes. But he, more importantly, also refloated the idea that the US military could seize Iran's energy strategic Karg Island. So this idea that we were talking about a while ago, weeks ago, that there could be US ground troops deployed to Iran, it's kind of gone away. But it was back, Trump raising the idea once again that he would seize Karg Island. If you chose to take him seriously, it certainly felt at that point this morning like the ceasefire was pretty tenuous, if anyone was holding on to the idea that it was still a ceasefire. And then just a few hours later, he announced that discussions with the Islamic Republic of Iran had been going very well at the highest level of the Iranian leadership, and they were approved. And then he was on in the Oval Office, basically reading out with a little more detail this complete U-turn that he'd done on social media. He was reading it out to the camera.
Hello, everybody. Just had a big day. I know you'll never be satisfied, but that's okay. That doesn't bother me at all. We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents. We should get done over the next few days. We'll probably have a signing maybe in Europe, and it's a great thing. And most importantly, we have a deal that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, which was the whole purpose of what we had to go through to get this. So it was a very big thing. But we have a signing soon, and the documents are in pretty final shape. So we'll see. Very good. Should be done. That should be done pretty quickly. They want it every bit as much as everybody else wants it. And I think a lot of good relationships can ensue from this.
Yeah, that octagon on the White House lawn at the moment, Mark, that could be the only fight Donald Trump can manage right now, because this one is chaos. It's chaotic. He's at the stage where he's recycling a failed strategy. He did go on to say that discussions and final points have been in both concept and great detail, and that the points had been approved by all parties involving, well, he reeled off a number of countries, US, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, etc., etc. So a third night of strikes will not now happen.
Yeah, this is not the first time that the president has done this sort of about turn. He's presented before doomsday scenarios, with this huge sense of jeopardy and, impending disaster for Iran, only to then a few hours later pull back from the brink. I guess the question is, is this the case of the boy who cried wolf? Is the jeopardy ever real? Are the breakthroughs and U-turns real? It's so hard to really know what the actual, situation is, because he's just saying so many things all the time.
Yeah, and they are meaningless. What does that mean that he said today? And why is that more significant and meaningful than what we've been told in recent days and recent weeks? I mean, that call I had with him last week talking about how Iran was doing what they were supposed to do. Well, fast forward 36, 48 hours, and that absolutely wasn't the case. He's a president who misreads the minds of his adversaries, but also of his allies in this conflict. And it continues to hurt him. And it goes back to his promises. No more foreign wars. And sure, it's a foreign war, but it's very much impacting him back in the United States. This is a war being fought at the petrol pumps. And that's why he doesn't have an easy exit strategy. That's why he's bending over backwards. And that's why, frankly, he's the president of chaos when it comes to conflict in the Middle East right now.
And that's why he really doesn't want to get back to an all-out shooting match. Again, I think if we're to try and analyse what's happened over the past week or so, I think it's the case that, look, there's Trump world and there's the real world. And in the real world, serious negotiators on all sides have been trying to find a way out of this. In Trump world, we get all this noise and bluster and bluff. And every now and again, Trump world and the real world kind of collide. And then there is kinetic action, as they say in the military. There are airstrikes, and that's what's happened over the course of the past week. I mean, remember, we were in a situation a week ago where there was a deal on the table, but then it was the Israelis whose strategy doesn't align any longer with the Americans because Trump wants the war to stop. American public opinion is that the war should stop. Israel doesn't want the war to stop, and Israeli public opinion is to finish the job. So there's no alignment there. And so last week it was Netanyahu who derailed the process that was ongoing and the deal that was almost there. So it got derailed last week. Trump appears to have got Netanyahu back in his box to a certain extent, which means that he can now talk about this deal coming to fruition again. But then to add to that, the complication of the Apache helicopter that was shot down, which Trump had to respond to. So he did respond with so-called defensive action. He kind of made it sound like that would be below the threshold of breaking the ceasefire. So he did all that, and now he's back on track with his plan for a deal. But remember too, this isn't a deal to end the war for good. This isn't a deal where one side gets to claim victory, genuine victory, and the other has lost. No, it's just a memorandum of understanding where they can deal and discuss the complicated issue of the nuclear program. So it's, as ever, it's not what Trump is presenting it to be.
Yeah, Mark, he's a president who has presented himself as a champion of peace through strength, but all we see in the Middle East is the contrary, war through weakness.
Remarkably, though, President Trump is suggesting that peace deal could be done and dusted as soon as this weekend, with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, possibly signing this peace agreement in Europe. I guess we'll wait and see, as ever, with this. But, that would be an extraordinary moment.
Yeah, and a big relief.
Now, Mark, you've been out and about in the capital, Washington, D.C., yeah?
Yes. So I mentioned the Octagon. I mean, it's huge. Have you seen it, James? I guess, Martha, you've not been in DC for a bit, so you haven't.
Not in person,
real life.
No, but the picture's staggering.
James, have you seen it?
Yeah, massive. it dwarves the White House itself, doesn't it?
It genuinely does. I mean, although I have to say, the White House, whenever visitors come to see me in Washington, I'm sure you've had the same thing. People are always surprised at how small the White House is in real life. But this thing makes it look even smaller. So it's on the South Lawn. We were invited to go and have a look at it. And a few days ahead of this UFC fight that's taking place on Sunday night. But I mean, we'll go into that in a minute because I'm sure you've both got thoughts on that. But that kind of spurred us on to do a bit of a deeper dive into what Trump is, the Trumpification of Washington, D.C., if you like, because it's a bit of a mixed picture. There are some things that he's doing in Washington that objectively have made the place better. The fountains in the city's many parks that have been off for in some cases nearly a decade for one reason or another, and renovation work has been delayed and never really happened. Trump, in his own way, has kind of bulldozed through all that, bulldozed through the bureaucracy and any barriers that are put in place, and just got things working. And he's got a bit of a deadline because it's the 250th anniversary of America. It's America's birthday this year, so he wanted to get things done, and he has. The fountains are open. The city, I would argue, is looking cleaner than it once did. Is that because of him? Maybe. But then, with all of that, he's doing some other things. We know about the bulldozing of the East Wing, hugely controversial. The building of an arch that's going to look like the Arc de Triomphe. He wants to do that as well. Very controversial. And then there's the reflecting pool between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, which is now a little bluer than it was.
Yeah, I'm with you on the fountains. That's a good thing, and that shows the Capitol in all its glory. And cleanliness, no one's going to argue with that. I suppose for me the difference is change according to everybody's taste and change according to his taste. Like the Oval Office, the White House, the gold. That's his taste, that's his personal preference. That is very much not to everybody's taste. I think the reflecting pool, for me, I don't know about you, but anytime you go to the Lincoln Memorial and stood on the spot where Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech, you think to yourself, this is where it happened and this is how it looked. I think when you look out now, it looks like a Tenerife swimming pool. And sure, Donald Trump likes that, but that can't be right, can it? Not for me anyway.
James, I'm going to disagree with you there because I thought that's what it would look like. But actually, having gone down there and spent a bit of the day there yesterday, I actually thought it looked rather better than it has in the past. It didn't look particularly blue, but it looked cleaner, and you could see the bottom of it to start with. But, and here's the problem, I think it's a short-term fix that's, by the way, cost a huge amount of money. It was supposed to cost a couple of $1 million to renovate. It's actually cost, I think, upwards of $13-14 million. Short-term fix because what they've done is drained it, painted the bottom blue, put some sort of swimming pool liner on it, but they haven't fixed the core problem, which is that the water can't be filtered quickly enough because the filter system doesn't work and the water's really shallow.
Sounds more and more like Tenerife to me, Mark.
Well, I think it looked better. It looked cleaner, but we'll see how long it lasts. But if the clean, if the working fountains is one end of the scale that most people are thumbs up about, and the reflective pool is a bit like, well, doesn't look that much different from what it looked like before. At the very other end of the scale is things like this arch that he wants to build, which is over the bridge towards Arlington, for anyone who knows Washington. And it really does alter the physical landscape of the city because it's huge. It's like the Arc de Triomphe that he wants to put up to commemorate the birthday, the 250th birthday. And I spoke to Charles Birnbaum. He's the CEO of the Cultural Landscape Foundation. And he talked about, and I had not really thought of it like this, but he talked about cities having a bone structure that is set. And if you upset that structure, then you upset the kind of equilibrium of a city. This is his view on what Trump is doing to Washington.
I am a fan of great cities throughout the world. And what's been shocking these last months is to see the sort of whiplash-inducing proposals that keep coming fast and furious that will have significant impacts, forever altering a significant city plan that is a globally celebrated work of planning, architecture, and landscape architecture. I can't begin to conject how the president sees the world, but what I can say is the impression that I think many of us have is that he views many of these objects as just that. They're objects in space. You know, if you look at how he holds up models of these structures, they're baubles. They are objects in space. And the problem is that the monumental city of Washington, D.C., its bone structure is all about those visual and spatial relationships, like many great works of planning around the world. And these objects that are being plopped down are severing these critical visual and spatial relationships.
And one thing I thought was very interesting is he, I don't know what you both think, but I said to him, look, let's take the ballroom. It's being built. It's happening. He said, well, maybe not. Maybe the lawsuit will stop it. But if it is built, I said, will it be knocked down again when Trump is gone and you'll rebuild the East Wing? And he seemed to suggest that was possible. I don't know what you think. Would they actually do that?
I guess it depends who's in the White House next, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right, Martha. And if it's the other side that wins the election, they won't have the appetite to preserve monuments to Donald Trump. You know, that celebration, that visible celebration of his politics and everything that brought to the United States. There will be an effort, at least, to reverse everything that he's changed about the structure, I think.
Yeah, but the cost and literally to knock down all these things that he has built. I mean, the opposite argument would be to preserve them as a moment in history, not to spend a load of money knocking them down again.
Let's do that podcast in 2029. How about that?
If we're talking about personal taste and personal preferences, having an octagon for UFC fighting on the White House lawn, that is the ultimate in personal decisions made. You know, he's had a chat with his mate Dana White, who is the head of the UFC, and they've decided that this was going to happen a year ago, and they've put public money behind it. And, you know, this idea in, you know, what is supposed to be the home of Western democracy, now the setting for a cage fight, I just would never have imagined seeing something like that. You know, we used to debate the morals of cage fighting UFC as a sport at all. And now it's the first sport to be held, you know, on the White House lawn.
Yeah, in the back garden of the People's House. You know, how many of the people want a UFC fight of all things?
Yeah, I mean, there was a real mixed vibe down there this morning. There were lots of people. So all the journalists were brought in, and there were the White House journalists, us White House correspondents, but there were also lots of sports journalists who were there as well. Many of them had come from the home of UFC, from Las Vegas. It was a real mixed vibe, as I say. Lots of people very excited, lots of people slightly confused as to why this was happening. But for me, it kind of was a real reflection, wasn't it, of everything that President Trump is all about, for those who love him and those who loathe him. It was sort of, you know, a projection, this sport, and it's not like a boxing match. It's a fight. It's a cage fight. It sort of is a projection of power, of force, of dominance, but it's also blunt. It's primitive, and surely somewhat unbecoming of the White House.
Spoken like a White House correspondent rather than a sports journalist, Mark.
And don't forget that Donald Trump invited the biggest name in UFC, Conor McGregor, to the Oval Office for St. Patrick's Day last year. The same Conor McGregor who has been found civilly liable for rape in Ireland. You know, it is toxic masculinity at its very worst, but Donald Trump is willing to turn a blind eye to that. You know, in fact, he embraces it. You know, he invites them inside the White House and outside the White House. So I think, real questions about taste and decency in all of this.
He was only around 50 years out.
Yeah, and of course, why is this cage fight taking place on Sunday? Well, it is a certain elderly man's birthday, isn't it?
Yeah, Donald Trump turning 80 on the day of that fight.
Yeah, so it's a little bit about America's 250th. It's about a lot about someone else's 80th, surely.
Yeah. Donald Trump, the second US president ever to turn 80 in office, obviously the other being his immediate predecessor, Joe Biden. And by the time that Donald Trump leaves office, providing he finishes his full term, he will be the oldest president that this country has ever had.
Yeah, an old president who appears to fall asleep. That's what some say in public, despite the stellar medical records. Every time he has a checkup, the administration deny that he ever does fall asleep during meetings. But I think it's fair to say that he is a man definitely slowing down. And listen, he is knocking on 80. Definitely does close his eyes for long pauses during on-camera meetings in the Oval Office and when he's around the cabinet table.
He's just resting his eyes.
He's not alone.
Anyway, that's plenty from us. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next Monday recapping what will be an extraordinary Sunday night fight at the White House.
Certainly will. As ever, send comments and questions to trump100@sky.uk, and we'll be back next week.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.